Hello! Welcome to Clockworks, a Legion podcast. I'm Paul Moffat.
I'm Jan Moffat.
And I hope you're feeling funny because we're talking about the comic book.
No.
Because comic in book doesn't really mean funny anymore, but that's like where it originates, you know? You get it?
We always called them the funny papers when I was a kid. Did you call them that?
No.
Like the comics in the newspaper were the funny papers?
I feel like people only called them the funny papers in like the 50s. I think you grew up in the past. We're talking about the third, you grew up in the prairies, which is like the past.
Paul Moffat. Take that back.
Never. We're talking about the third X-Men Legacy Legion book. This is the third special bonus podcast we've made about this. The second one was only 2 weeks ago, and the first one was last year. We're going to be doing another one in 2 weeks from now.
And that'll be the end of it, because there's only 4 volumes in this set.
Exactly.
So X-Men Legacy Legion, Volume 3, comprises of issues 13 to 18. There's a 2-part issue called Hope and Glory, then a single issue, Place of Broken Things, and then a 3-part issue, Wear the Grudge Like a Crown.
Right.
So should we get into the issues? Anything to say before we start?
No, I'm ready to get going.
These are written by Simon Spurrier, etc.?
Yeah, they are not all illustrated by the same person.
Okay.
I'll give illustration credits issue by issue because the illustrator changes.
They're traditionally called the artist, not so much the illustrator.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Illustrator is usually like a picture book?
Yeah.
Okay. Just
The artist is a full collaborator with the writer, and together they create the text. They're not just illustrating what the writer tells them to. That's not how comics works.
Exactly.
Sorry, I misspoke. The artist is not the same with every issue, and I'll give the art credits after you've given the synopsis of each issue, I think. Does that make sense?
That makes sense.
Okay.
Issue 13, Hope and Glory, Part 1. David goes to London to meet with mutants there and tries to convince them to help him with the anti-mutant sentiment. He's confronted by Pete Wisdom. David pulls Pete into a false delusion where he's being attacked. And when he comes out, he blasts David in the face. This whole issue is narrated by Pete Wisdom.
That's right. The cover of issue 13 is a series of like Russian nesting dolls that are... We talked about this. I think we were agreed that they all look like different manifestations of David's powers.
Yes,
like the characters, the creatures or people in his head who have the powers, right?
Yeah.
A bunch of different Russian nesting dolls with David inside one of them.
Mm-hmm.
That's the cover. All of these are written by Simon Spurrier. I'm going to give his credit right now and then not again because it's always the same. And all the covers are by Mike Del Mundo. I'm going to give that credit now and then not again because it's always the same. But this issue is pencils by Tan Ang Huat and ink by Craig Yuang. Before we move into the issue, like just about the cover, it's doesn't require that much decoding, but maybe the significance of the cover to this issue in particular is David is the one on the inside when it seems like other people are on the outside. So it's a Russian nesting doll with David on the inside.
Mm-hmm.
Also, just in general, how David's powers work. Are there people inside the person who seems like he's on the outside? And then also I thought like maybe in this issue and the next one, David is playing a shell game.
Yeah, exactly.
And I mean, through the whole book, really, things never are what they seem to be. And David is always putting deception around what he's doing.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I was thinking with this cover is the whole issue is layers of reality.
Yeah.
And just when you think you've made it to the outside layer or the inside layer, you still got another layer to go.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you know anything about Pete Wisdom going into this?
Nothing. I'd
Me
never
neither.
heard of him before.
Me neither.
I looked him up a little bit as we were preparing to talk, and I mean, honestly, he seems a little bit to me, and feel free to yell at me, listeners, if you know about Pete Wisdom and you think I'm wrong, but based on a Wikipedia, he seems a little bit like a John Constantine ripoff.
Yeah, that's the kind of the vibe that I was getting as well.
I mean, he references James Bond in this, but he feels way more Constantine than Bond. Even though he is working for MI13, which is an imaginary branch of the British spy agency. And his power is he has like super sharp plasma fingers. And when I looked it up, he says it in the comic, but when I looked it up, it clarified even more that they're like hotter than the center of the sun. It seems in this issue, like he can use them to cut telepathic things. And that's an interesting, just to like maybe jump ahead a little bit to Pete Wisdom, and like my understanding when I Googled it of what those fingernails are is they're just like super hot. So it's weird and also very compelling to me that he can cut through psychic things with them. That doesn't seem like that's a standard use of that power, of his power.
I felt like it was just David taking him out. I didn't actually think it was him doing it.
No,
But I guess like he slashes across using his fingers. You're right.
I think we're meant to understand that he can, like, once blindfold lets him see those tendrils, he can physically cut them. Which I think is quite cool, actually.
That is pretty cool.
This issue is like an unreliable narrator times 2, it feels like to me.
Yes, absolutely.
Because Pete Wisdom is the one talking to us, and he's not being truthful. And we can see sometimes the difference between what his narrative boxes say and what's happening in front of us to like clue us in that he's lying in the voiceover.
Yeah.
But then also he's being lied to and the world is not what he thinks it is.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we sort of know that by the end of this issue, but we really find it out in the next issue. The other thing I kind of think about, question I have about this issue, what do we think about, he's going to come up a few more times, but the king, I didn't write down his name, but the king from an imaginary country, and everything he says is translated from Arabic. Do you have an opinion about that?
Maybe. He comes from an imaginary country that's in, Arabia, that's like near Kuwait, it seemed like. I can't remember what they said.
Yeah. No, I think you're right.
It seems it has some racism issues, I would say. But it seems like this is the relationship that Britain would have with a country that is giving them oil. And they want to impress or whatever.
They want the oil and they don't care about the policies of the country.
Exactly.
And like, that's Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
And I guess you don't want to actually kill the Saud.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And like, they don't end up killing him. That's the whole plot of this. Or is that the next issue? Either way.
The last thing I have to say about this issue is just that I'm a little irritated in this issue about the unreliable narratorness, and I'm only going to get more irritated through this whole book, just to put that out there. That said, though, I kind of like issues like this where the conflict is actually all mental. All the physical conflicts aren't really happening. Yeah. I don't want too much of that. I don't want all my comics to be like that. But in a comic like Legion, which is all really about not just psychic power, but like mental discipline, even, that like there aren't any actual fights in this comic.
Yeah.
I kind of like it. What do you think?
Yeah, I definitely think that's an interesting thing about this. I'm a bit of a fan of like the reality inside of a reality.
Yep.
The twist that it wasn't the reality, and then the figuring out of like, oh, we're in another one of these. And trying to figure out the layers of where
Inception.
you are. I guess the inception is what that is. What I liked about this issue was all meeting new X-Men.
Yeah.
Like, and I mean, X-Men that I've heard of before, like Psylocke and Pixie.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so David trying to convince new people to be on his side and kind of getting them to agree with him was interesting.
Yep.
And kind of the politics of a whole new place.
Yeah, totally.
So immediately following the previous issue, Pete Wisdom is attacked by Ruth for killing David, but they soon realize that they are still in his mind. David sends Pete through delusion after delusion while he executes his real plan, pro-mutant propaganda, to convince London away from mutaphobia. In the end, Pete is angry and calls for David's mother, the Israeli ambassador.
The cover of this issue is David playing with the other characters on a game board. This, first of all, is very reminiscent of season 2 of Legion, the TV show. Mm-hmm. It's relevant to this particular issue because we see here that David is manipulating people. I mean, this is a theme through all the books, but in this issue particularly, all these people, David is setting them all up and setting them all up in the game board sense, not in the implicating them for a crime sense.
Yeah.
He's moving the pieces so that what happens next will be what he expects and predicts, and it is.
Mm-hmm.
This issue was also pencils by Tan Ang Huat and inks by Craig Yuang.
There's one part in this that I really like where Pete is trying to get through the delusions and he's just annoyed and annoyed and annoyed. And one of them is he's inside the world of the comic being inked.
Yeah.
Which I thought was very clever.
We have like the narrative voice is like the inker or something, explaining how to make a comic.
Yep.
Yeah, I also enjoyed that. In the beginning of this comic, Ruth blindfold reveals her power. We as readers have always known that she's had power, that she's powerful and she's dangerous, but maybe it's good to remind us of that.
Yes, absolutely.
What is with her monstrous shape when she's using her power, though? Like, she goes all pointy.
I didn't notice that.
Arms get longer, her face goes pointy, her arms and fingers get longer. Like, I suppose one of my questions is, do you think that is just stylized art? Or do we think that Blindfold is actually changing shape because she's mad and using her power?
I felt like it was just the representation of her power, of her like lightning-ish stuff coming out of her fingers and visually showing her anger. I'm not sure that her body is literally doing that.
It's like, look at page...
But it does make her very monstrously looking.
Page 29 especially, and I'll put up this image in the show notes or whatever.
When it's like coming out of her head, basically?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whether it's what's literally happening or not, what does it mean that she's so deformed by her power or by her anger? Is this because we're in Pete Wisdom's point of view and he finds her monstrous?
Maybe that's a part of it. Yeah, I think it's just a very emotional set of panels.
Right.
And we're right there with her from our perspective too, of we don't know that this is a delusion at this point. We can kind of guess because the comic's about him, but from her perspective, he's just killed David.
Yep.
So she's exploding with anger and her power is exploding in the same way. And it almost looks like her mind is exploding and like Ruth's powers are very mental. Mm-hmm. And so to have this kind of swirl coming out of her head really shows like her lack of control in this moment.
Right. So I totally called, by the way, even in the last issue, that when David says he's going to wipe mutaphobic Britain off the map, that does not mean he's going to kill them all. It means he's going to do something to make them not mutaphobic.
Yeah.
But I still like it. Even though I called it, I like it that basically these 2 issues are just David has a big PR plan.
Yeah, exactly.
But even though I like it, it's pretty naive, isn't it?
It is. Yeah. To think like that this would work. It's similar to in the last volume when, if we confuse people, then they won't be as angry. If we give them this fall guy, I can't remember his name.
Yeah.
Then they'll be confused and they won't act anymore. And this is kind of the same thing, is like, if we show them some good mutants, they
won't hate mutants
anymore. And it's fairly naive in terms of like the writing, I feel like. It's not naive. I don't think David is supposed to be being naive in this. I think it's actually the writer.
That's what I was driving at. Like, do we think that this is showing how naive David is, or is this the writer just being like, if everybody sees mutant not blowing up the queen, then they'll decide they don't hate mutants anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
And you're like, gee, I guess you just solved racism. You know?
Yeah.
I like it. There's something appealing to me about that kind of optimism, but it also is like, okay, though.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. What do you think of Pete Wisdom's big trump card in this being like, I'll call your mom?
Yeah. Yeah, man. I don't really understand why he did this to Pete. Like, why was he taking Pete out of the picture for this time? Because Pete was going to mess up this plan, I guess?
Because he wants Pete to stop the assassination on his own? Because Simon Spurrier wants to be able to lie to us for 2 issues?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, it's a little
thin in the plot.
Right? Yeah. And I'm still really enjoying this series. I'll say, I think I enjoy every volume a little less than I enjoyed the previous one. And part of that is because I feel like Simon Spurrier is very hooked on the twist reveal.
Yeah.
And like, let's just lie to the readers for a whole issue.
Yep.
And this is, although there's things about these 2 issues that I enjoy, that's part of the like, but why though? Why couldn't we be in on this plan? Or why though?
Yeah.
You know? Because if we're in on the plan, there doesn't seem to be any conflict.
Yeah, exactly.
So there has to be someone trying to stop his plan. But the only person who can stop his plan is someone who doesn't understand it, because his plan is so obviously good, pure and good, and that no one would ever try to stop him.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to lie to someone so that they stop him. It also sets up, like, it seeds something that's going to play through the whole volume of David doesn't share his plans, and that causes him a lot of trouble.
Yeah. Exactly.
Again and again. And he does not learn this lesson.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe in that sense, it's like foreshadowing. By the end of the volume, David should have learned this lesson from this moment and doesn't.
Yeah. So he calls his mom.
Mm-hmm.
It's a bit silly, but also I'm kind of excited to meet his mom.
Mm-hmm.
Which we do in the next issue. So the next issue is a standalone, basically, called Issue 15, The Place of Broken Things. David meets his mother at the broken down Muir Island where he was raised. He confronts her about his childhood, and as they reconcile, he pulls her into his mind. He confirms that the man inside his brain is definitely not Professor X. Then an assassin kills his mother while aiming for David, and David teleports to Ruth at the X Mansion.
The cover of this issue is a hand holding a Polaroid of baby David, who's being held in like a baby Bjorn on his mother's front, with his hair blocking her face, and he's psychically moving things all around him.
Mm-hmm.
The relevance of the cover seems pretty clear that it's David meeting his mom. It's also the Polaroid because it's David revisiting his past. So he's looking back at his past, not just encountering it, but kind of reminiscing about it. Also, the like thing swirling around him totally reminds me of David in the kitchen on the TV show Legion.
I was going to say the exact same thing. This little picture just really reminds me of the show. One of the things swirling around him is a block with the letter X on it.
Yep.
Which I think is cute.
Yeah. We start this issue with Cyclops and the X-Men, and I have to just say, do you not want to punch stupid Cyclops in his stupid X-face?
Kinda. I don't like that costume at all. I didn't even realize this was Cyclops until later.
No. Yeah, I have two things. One is, like you, I hate Cyclops' X-face costume. I think it's the worst. I looked at it and it doesn't make sense. Like, where the blast comes out is not where his eyes are.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, I don't like it at all. Also, and I know that because this is David's book, the other people who are usually heroes are not necessarily, are going to be characterized a little differently because they're in opposition to David. Like, I get that. I'm not a Cyclops hater.
No.
But I like Cyclops when he's lawful good, not when he's smarmy douchebag.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely.
So I do not like Cyclops in this book at all.
Mm-hmm. But he's only in this first few panels of this issue.
No. And we're supposed to not like him.
Yes, definitely.
So success.
Definitely. I like this first moment where David reconstructs the building because he's looking at it. And then his mother comes and I didn't realize they'd made it again. And it just disappears. And he's like, oh no, it's all broken down. I was just remembering it. And he doesn't even fully realize that he's doing it.
Yeah.
He's just doing it by looking at a building that he knows what it should look like.
He says the line that I really like is, I was just remembering aloud.
Yeah.
It's like when I think about something and it just manifests in the world. Mm-hmm. I really like that moment a lot.
There's a lot of things in here that just show how incredibly powerful he is.
Yep.
And I feel like we're getting to that place in the TV show as well, where we're just getting glimpses of oh, look at how powerful he can be. I think about on the Legion TV show where he takes that big tar monster and just puts him in a jar and explodes him.
Yep.
And there's no conflict there. There's no big beat 'em up scene. David can take something and put it in a jar and explode it. It doesn't faze him.
That so really powerful. Is a moment in the show of demonstrating David's power.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like absolutely both in this moment in the comic and in the show, all the characters think they know how powerful he is, and we keep getting glimpses of no. He's much more powerful than that.
Yeah, exactly.
If only he and you knew it.
Yeah, exactly.
When did all this bubble universe stuff happen?
I don't know. Not know. I am not up on my X-Men comics enough to know this whole story. And I assume that this is when Legion got introduced in the comics?
Maybe. Listeners, if you know, he's telling us about a story that has happened in X-Men comics, I guess?
The Age of X, it's called. I guess it's that's in the corner, so I'm guessing that's what it might be called.
I haven't read it and don't know anything about it. Maybe we should go and look it up?
Maybe we should.
I don't know. If you've read it and you like it, let us know. Or if you've read it and you think we shouldn't waste our time, let us know that also.
Yeah, that would be even more important. We don't want to waste our time and money on comics that suck.
In this issue, we learn that Golden Mind Charles is definitely not Charles. We kind of knew that already.
Yeah, but this is full-on confirmation.
Yeah.
That that his mother sees him and asks him a question and he just doesn't answer at all. And she goes, you're not him. There's no way.
You said you were looking forward to meeting David's mother. What do you think now that you did?
A little disappointed
Hmm.
in what she was like. Like, she was fairly boring
Yeah.
as a character. Like, she didn't really do anything at all. Honestly, I'd like to know more about her. I was disappointed that she was killed so quickly.
Yeah.
And I had no emotional investment in her before she was killed. Except for her, by virtue of being David's mother.
Yeah, I think she's like a woman in a refrigerator.
A little bit, yeah.
Right? She isn't a character. She's a plot element motivating David.
Hmm.
And that's kind of disappointing.
That is, you're right. I also just don't know anything about her and Professor X and how they had David.
Mm-hmm.
That's a story for from a different comic.
I did think it was quite emotionally effective. When I reached for a maternal figure, I reached for the woman who strapped me down and tortured me because at least she was there.
Yeah.
Like, that was quite an emotional punch.
That's quite a punch, yeah. There is, throughout this issue, this whole theme of, like, drums, of thrumming, and I'm not really sure, like, is that him, like, sensing that his death is coming? Or something? And then at the very, very end, Cyclops is like, I thought I heard drums.
Right. I didn't write that down in my notes, so I almost forgot about it, but I didn't write it down in my notes because I have no idea.
Mm-hmm.
I think Cyclops hears it not because I don't think Cyclops and David are experiencing the same phenomenon. I think Cyclops is hearing David approaching.
Yeah.
But I don't know that makes sense with what we see either before or after, especially since, I mean, again, we say this, we always spoil to the end of the volume that we're talking about, even though we basically stick to the issue. But like, the next issues are going to make us feel like David is hunting Cyclops down, but he's not.
Mm-hmm. It's true.
So
it's just kind of, once again, not playing fair with the audience.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Because like
that's what it's supposed to be.
The sound is Golden Charles banging on the bars, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Well, and by the end of this, he's let out, so there's that.
Yeah. Maybe that is a sign that he's going to escape?
Yeah, maybe.
I don't really know.
Well, moving on then. Issue 16, Wear the Grudge Like a Crown, Part 1. David decides to go after Cyclops, who murdered Professor X. Cyclops and his team are containing a young, dangerous mutant. David takes them down one by one, including Magneto, until it's just David and Cyclops. They agree to fight without powers, and it is being televised live.
The cover is David with an X burned out of his hair. I have to say, there are clearly like smoke coming out, so it's burned out, even though Cyclops' eye blasts are not hot. See Gail Simone on Twitter if you want to ever ask about that. I think it's a really compelling visual, though.
Yeah, it's cute.
The significance of the cover is like, this issue is a fight between David and Cyclops.
Yeah.
That's an I-beam hole.
Yeah.
It also, though, suggests that there's something missing from David. Like, there's a hole in him.
Yeah.
Right?
An X-shaped hole?
An X-shaped hole, and maybe the X signifies Charles.
Mm-hmm.
This issue has an artist credit, Paul Davidson, which I presume means he did both the pencils and the ink. So,
Cyclops is working with, like, a whole team of X-Men? Are they still the X-Men? Are they like a rogue team? They're working with Magneto.
This I know. After Professor X dies, I don't know the circumstances of how Cyclops killed Professor X. Whether it was an accident or circumstances made him do it, I don't actually know. But I do know that after Professor X died, Cyclops started a new team. Probably still called the X-Men, I don't know, but that's this. This is the new team founded by Cyclops with all new members, including Magneto and Emma Frost and the Stepford Cuckoos, and then some other people that we don't really know or care about.
Yeah, that we'll see in this issue. Okay.
And that's whenever he's got his X face, he's leading his new team. Those two things always go together.
Okay.
I think. If I'm incorrect, correct me, but my understanding is. I haven't read most of those issues, so just read about them. I think in this issue, the unreliable narrator is pushed a little too hard.
How so?
Although, I have to say, I wrote that note and then I went back and reread the whole comic and was like, maybe everything he says is technically true. Because he talks about hunting down his quarry who doesn't even know he's hunting him, and we presume that that's Cyclops, but it's actually Luca. So maybe I don't think the unreliable narrator is pushed too hard. There's a lot of talk within David's head to people who are inside his plan that's very misdirect-y. But maybe that's okay.
Can I just, digress for a tiny bit?
Yep.
Onto, I think it's Emma Frost and her costume.
Yeah.
That is entirely armor. Look at armor. I don't know what page I'm on. Page 87. If you're following along with me.
Yep.
She's got a neck armor thing, and then just bare chest, just belly to neck. Just her breasts are covered barely. What the heck is this costume? Is this really what she wears? I mean, I know Emma Frost wears very revealing things, but this is just beyond ridiculous. You're mad at Cyclops' X face. I'm just this costume is beyond the pale.
This is an especially stupid costume, right?
This is so stupid.
Emma Frost in her lingerie and cape makes some sort of sense because one of her superpowers is that her skin turns to diamond, so she doesn't need any kind of armor, so she's flaunting that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's obviously also exploitative. Yeah. So
it's not Emma Frost, it's Ileana. I don't know who that is, but yeah.
The one with the totally open front is Ileana?
Oh no, that isn't. Must be
Ileana and Emma Frost look very alike in this comic.
And they're wearing the same costume-ish.
They're wearing the same colors. But Ileana's wearing a halter top.
Oh, okay, yes, I see now.
With a boob window.
Of course.
Halter top with a high neck and a boob window.
And an exposed stomach.
That's what a halter top is.
Yes, sorry.
The costumes throughout are not great. I don't know if we need to blame whoever is in charge of X-Men at this point for all these costumes, or if these are Paul Davidson's choices. I like the art generally in this book.
I do too.
But none of the costumes of the X... I think it is whoever's in charge of the X-Men at the time, because none of these X-Men costumes are good. Magneto's all-white costume is he should be... It doesn't... improve at all on the red costume. It just looks washed out.
Yep.
But yes, Emma Frost's particularly silly costume. And there's even a line, I can't remember if it's in this issue or the next one. I think it's in the next one, where someone says to Emma Frost, Miss Empowered Bikini Wearing Lady. And that's a funny line, but she's not wearing a bikini. Right?
Yeah, that's true.
I really, really like to come back to earlier in this issue. I really like Ruth and David in David's head and the loudspeaker being should I kiss her?
Yeah.
Oh crap, she heard that. And that. And that.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of cleverness with Ruth being in his head and his thoughts as a loudspeaker.
Yeah. And in the earlier issue, when his mom was in his head, they did the same thing. Where don't ask about the noise. I can hear your thoughts, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's great. That gag is always funny to me. I also really like David and Ruth appearing with just the word doom.
Yes, that is also great.
And then in this issue, what do we think of the moment that really drew my attention other than that is the moment when he messes with Ruth's mind.
Yeah.
What do you think of that?
Yeah, that is messed up. And that is where it is unclear in these comics what kind of a person David is. Is he... I mean, it's similar to what we say in the show. Is he a hero or is he a villain? And there's a very strong dichotomy in comics to be a hero or villain.
Mm-hmm.
But, I mean, he kills people in this, like blasts the smithereens out of the people who assassinate his mother.
Yep.
And then, yeah, I really don't like when he manipulates Ruth's mind. Is that in this comic?
It's in this issue, yeah.
Okay.
He manipulates Ruth's mind so that she'll have more confidence or whatever.
Yeah, because all she needs is more confidence. But then, no, you rule you, and he's a liar.
And I think lampshades that, right? I don't think that the writer is unaware of that.
Oh, yeah, for sure. They're calling it out as he's doing it.
And even the difference between what you said about the strong dichotomy between a hero and a villain in comics, David's mother puts that into words.
Yeah.
Right? So I feel like much like the TV series, this run of Legion comics is deliberately interrogating, what if you're not exactly a villain or exactly a hero? Mm-hmm. But you're in this world where you have to be a superhero and you think of yourself as a superhero, but you're somewhere in between, really? You know?
Yep.
They're kind of swinging between making him a supervillain and a superhero instead of really sticking in the ambiguous place.
Yeah, I agree.
But that's still, I think, making the point. Then every issue we have to, as readers, the task I think that they've set for themselves is that every issue we have to believe that it's possible that David has done a heel turn. And then the twist at the end is, oh, actually, he was a hero all along. But then the next issue, it has to be plausible that oh, now he's a villain. Mm-hmm. And one day, it's not going to twist.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly. Yeah, that's what I think so too.
And that's I think mostly successful, but they lose credibility every time they lie to me.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's move on to issue 17, Wear the Grudge Like a Crown, Part 2. David and Cyclops fight physically until Cyclops finally overpowers him, and David resorts to using his powers. Cyclops then eye blasts David, and the young mutant fuses David into a monster. Ruth knows that she must kill him now, and then Luca shows up.
The cover of this issue is a black and white image of David as a boxer all beat up with Ruth and some of his mind alters in his corner. Mm-hmm. The significance of this doesn't require a lot of unpacking. There's a fist fight.
Yep.
This issue has Koi Pham credited as the artist, which I presume means both pencils and ink.
Mm-hmm. The art in this issue, the panels and the art and the layout of it are fantastic, I must say.
I agree.
We absolutely have digital and paper edition of this particular issue, and I'm really glad that we have the paper one because the art in it is just superb. The way it goes back and forth between extreme close-ups of physical fighting to the scenes around them. And then there's a couple of really big panels that are very well done and very martial arts movie reminiscent.
Yeah, for sure. I think this is my favorite art of this volume.
And there's a particular panel that I've already put on our Clockworks Twitter feed that is page 100 of the volume that has small silhouetted David and Cyclops, and then in a big like blue glowing in the sky representations of them in armor, and it looks so much and so reminiscent of the fight between David and the Shadow King in the last episode of this season.
It is. It's interesting. That's such an interesting moment because that, I think, like we talked about Ruth being disfigured, and is that artistic license or is that accurately representing what's happening? Here, this is not representing a psychic battle. Like, this is an artistic, not a psychic moment, right? The artist is giving us a metaphor in the background, not showing us what's happening psychically, because this isn't a psychic battle.
Yeah, exactly.
I really like this issue. I like the way it looks. I really like David talking directly to us at the beginning of this. Hey, you reading this, hearing my thoughts. Like, he breaks the fourth wall.
Yeah.
I really like David kind of philosophizing and theorizing while there's a fist fight in the background.
Yeah.
And the way that this issue is all set up is what should be the like, you would think I'm getting that backwards. He's philosophizing in the background while a fist fight happens. But no, the philosophizing is the foreground.
Yeah.
The fist fight is happening in the background of all of that. And I really like it. I really like the way it's all set up makes it seem like the physical conflict isn't really the main point, and it isn't. I just like it. Although, what the fork is David nattering on about? Of course, training would make a difference in a fight.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, what are you talking about? Not that I've been in a fight. But yes, someone who has been trained in martial arts, that would make a difference. You don't need a plan if you've been trained and you've practiced. That's the point of training and practice.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not really the point, I guess. But that bothered me a little bit. But in general, I really like this issue. I don't know if I love or hate the like way overly florid and theoretical commentator, and the other guy's like, yeah, shut up, let's go back to the fight. I can't decide if I love that or hate that. What do you think?
I think I like it. I like it.
I think this is really good.
Yeah. And then we see David get sucked into this. I mean, this mutant that's been contained this whole time does some sort of thing where she merges all these different fleshes together. And we see this monster that we've seen in flashes already of like, this is the future David is headed for. And so this is kind of a culmination of something we've seen all along.
Yep.
And this is what causes Luca to finally show up again in some sort of metal armor.
Yeah. He was wood before and now he's metal, so it like symbolizes that he's more powerful than he used to be.
I guess so, yeah.
More of a physical threat than he used to be anyway.
So moving on, the last issue of the volume, Wear the Grudge Like a Crown, Part 3. As Luca is about to kill Ruth, David explodes and contains everything, revealing that the entire thing, I don't know what to call it, besides thing, was all just a ruse to trap Luca. Then David is attacked in his mind, and the Professor X beast thing leaves him. At the end, David is trapped in his mind, unable to help anyone around him.
The cover of this issue is David's head in negative space, and we see his brain with either a fuse leading to a detonator, or it also kind of is reminiscent of a balloon because it's up above them, but the detonator has boom on it. So
yeah.
And Emma is about to push down the trigger, and Scott is there watching. The significance, Emma has psychically attacked David and put something in his brain that he wasn't aware of, and it's a bomb, and she's going to make it explode, right?
I guess, yeah. Is that a thing?
Yeah. Did you miss that?
I maybe missed that. Oh, yes, now I remember.
Right, yeah.
They'd have this whole fight. He reveals that it was all a ruse, but they'd already put this thing in his head.
Yes.
And that's why he's catatonic.
The Pyrrhic, in the beginning of, I think the, like, David gives his whole speech about, like, you're too, morally strict to ever cheat, and that means you're going to lose. Cheating means winning, blah, blah, blah. And then he collapses. And Cyclops is like, we cheated too. And that is a twist and a reveal that I really liked.
Yeah.
I thought it was well planted and had a great payoff because Cyclops says, use the Pyrrhic. And then the Stepford Cuckoos do something to David and we never see what that was.
Yeah.
But I wasn't really paying attention. And by the time it pays off, I had forgotten about it. And I was like, oh yeah, they did something to his brain. And they specifically said it wouldn't have time. And now that it's too late for the fight, it's doing something. Like, I thought it was really well paid off.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Once again, as we have seen through, at least the last two, this volume and the previous one, we started to see it in the first volume too. David is pretty sure he has the moral high ground and his moral judgments are sound, but
yeah, exactly.
Right? And that big twist of you have to cheat to be pragmatic to win and you don't have what it takes. Hey, you did have what it takes is like a real, your judgment is not as good as you think it is, David.
Yeah. Agreed.
Also, Luca's back. I don't really care about Luca very much.
No, me neither. He contains him at this point.
Sort of. By the end, the psychic golden faux Charles escapes with Luca's body.
Yeah.
So that's not good.
No. We'll see what happens in the next volume.
I also just bad move, Scott, to attack David. But also, like I said, this is the payoff of David doesn't share his plans, and now it has extremely backfired on him. Yeah,
exactly. He thinks he's a god.
Yeah.
This is where the similarities for the show come in, is that these comics are not that similar to our TV show, but there are some elements that are really there, he just thinks he's better than everybody else. He thinks he's a god. He thinks he can figure out exactly what to do.
Mm-hmm.
And he's so, humble and gosh shucks about it that you don't even really catch on.
Yeah.
That he is able to manipulate the entire world around him. And so when he feels like he is doing good by doing that, he will. But it doesn't work because he's not... Yeah, he's not all knowing, all powerful, all whatever. He's all powerful.
Yeah.
But he's not all knowing.
Yep.
And it really causes the biggest issues for him.
Yeah. And now, at this point, I'm very interested in what happens in issue 4, in volume 4. I am really looking forward to reading it. So, good job in that sense, Simon Spurrier. I say good job in that sense because I enjoy a lot of this, but I don't think it's as strong as volume 1. I don't think it's even quite as strong as volume 2.
Yeah.
And because, as we've said, it relies so heavily on the pulling the rug out from under us. I think that...
And I think this issue, unlike this volume, unlike the first two, relied on too much past knowledge.
Right.
I had to know a lot about how Professor X died and David's mother and this whole alternate bubble he used to live in. And I just I don't know any of that stuff. And so I can deduce a lot of things. I'm a smart person.
You are a smart person.
But doesn't mean I like it when it's just referencing past things constantly. It's not very fun to read.
Yeah.
When you don't know exactly what happened. And the only way I can find out why Cyclops killed Professor X is to go and find those issues, to look it up online, to figure it all out. Like, I don't want a ton of exposition, but a little bit would help.
I think you would just put your finger on it, that like, it's not that I'm lost. It's not that I can't figure it out. It just makes it less fun. Mm-hmm. Did I say who drew this issue? I don't think I did. This issue was pencils by Koi Pham and ink by Koi Pham and Jay Lyston.
Well, I must say, the art is really good.
It is. And the artists change. I like the art always. Mm-hmm. I think the art is always good.
Yeah.
I think I like Koi Pham's art best, but that's not a dig on anyone else. I like the art throughout. I think it's really good.
Yeah. I don't know in terms of the artist versus the artist or writer decides. They decide mutually and stuff, but the panels, the layout of the panels are really well done, especially in this last issue. When it's like several long panels all in a row, several big splash pages. I really think the panels make it interesting and often really help with making you feel like David's mind is broken.
Yeah.
Because the panels will be broken up in such a way that make you feel uncomfortable. They're getting small, they're getting big, they're going back and forth. It's difficult a little bit, and that's where, and when you're in his mind, that you want to feel that. And that's how a visual medium like comic can be similar to the medium of a TV show, in that it manipulates your feelings visually to make you understand what's going on with the characters.
Yeah. I don't know, like, I know for a fact that different writer-artist teams treat the breakdown of panels differently in who decides to do what. I think that the way that the panel breakdowns work is noticeably different in the last two volumes with Koi Pham as the artist, which makes me suspect that Simon Spurrier is giving the artist a fair bit of leeway.
Yeah, that's probably true.
Because when the artist changes, the layout noticeably changes. Mm-hmm. But that's total speculation. Does this volume give you any thoughts about what you expect or want to see in the show next season?
The idea of David having a master plan that, first of all, doesn't work, but second of all, he is good. He is trying to be good, but failing at it because he's trying to manipulate the world to be good. I think we've already seen that, and I'd like to see that more. And I'm hoping for more twists and turns in that direction that I'm not expecting, but in that kind of way. What about you?
I would like to see David's mother.
Yes.
An aspect of this comic that I would like to see. It might be nice, something that the show could maybe take from all these comics that might be interesting is just the, like, someone who claims to be Charles but isn't. A psychic entity that claims to be Charles, even if it's just for an episode.
Yeah,
that would be something that would be cool, I think. And I really hope they continue on the show to explore, like you said, the consequences of his power being so much greater than his judgment. Right? So I hope that he continues, as he is in these books, to, like, really be trying to do the right thing, but just getting worse and worse at it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Rather than a straight up villain turn. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Do you have any other things you want to say about this volume of X-Men Legacy, Legion, parentheses, Prodigal, exclamation point?
I think I'm good. I think I'd love to hear if our listeners have read these comics, if they have any thoughts on them themselves. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah.
You can tell us those things via Twitter at clockworkscast. You can send us an email, clockworkscast@gmail.com. We also have a Reddit and a Facebook. Those links are in our show notes. And this whole series about X-Men comics, about X-Men Legacy comics, is brought to you by our Patreon supporters because they got us over the edge of our goal to make these extra podcasts. So thanks to them. And if you want to join them and get us to our next goal, our future is, I'm not even sure what our next goal is, but we have them.
Our next goal is related to our other podcast, but we also would be open if you suggest a goal. We'll definitely take it into consideration.
Absolutely. All right. So if you want to find that Patreon, it is patreon.com/clockworkscast, where you can pledge as little as $1 and as much as you want. So, Paul.
So, Jan.
This has been me.
And I've been him.
Is that how we end things?
It is now. Goodbye.